My boyfriend's family invited me on vacation, then left me with a $7,000 bill because real girlfriends pay their way. When I showed Venmo receipts proving I already paid my share, they said I was making a scene, so I canceled their flights. I was sitting in a 600 per night hotel room in Maui, staring at an itemized bill that Mr. and Mrs. Peterson had slid across the breakfast table like it was a perfectly normal thing to do on the last day of vacation. $7,000. That's what they expected me to pay for my fair share of a trip I was practically guilt-tripped into joining. My hands were actually shaking as I flipped through the pages, seeing charges for helicopter tours I never took, and spa treatments I wasn't even invited to. This must be a mistake, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising in my chest. I looked up at Brandon, my boyfriend of 2 years, expecting him to jump in and clear things up. Instead, he was suddenly very interested in his overpriced avocado toast. Mrs. Peterson, call me Diana, honey, we're practically family, gave me that thin-lipped smile I'd come to dread over the past week. No mistake, sweetie, we just believe that everyone should contribute equally to family experiences. Brandon contributes to our family business, so his portion is covered. But you? Well, real girlfriends pay their way. I stared at her in disbelief, then looked at Brandon. Again. He finally met my eyes, giving me this helpless little shrug like, what can you do? That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a trap. And I'd walked right into it with my eyes wide open. Updated. Guys, I actually had to step away from my phone for a bit after writing this because I'm still so angry recalling this. The bill they handed me included things I didn't even do. And just wait until you hear about their revenge when I refuse to pay. Have you ever been financially ambushed by someone you trusted? I should have seen this coming from the very beginning. The invitation had seemed so genuine at the time. We'd love for you to join our annual family vacation, Diana had said over dinner at their sprawling suburban home 3 months earlier. We want to get to know the girl who's stolen our Brandon's heart. Brandon had squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes practically begging me to say yes. It'll be fun, he promised. And don't worry about the cost. Mom and Dad always cover the big expenses. That's just how they do things. I'd hesitated. As a CPA who'd worked her way through college and paid off $50,000 in student loans in just 4 years, I was careful with money. Very careful. I tracked every expense, saved aggressively for retirement, and never carried a credit card balance. The idea of letting someone else handle a significant expense made me uncomfortable. I'd be happy to pay my way, I'd offered. Just let me know what my share would be. Diana had waved her hand dismissively, the light catching on her massive diamond tennis bracelet. Don't be silly. You're family now. We've already booked everything. All you need to do is show up with your bikini and sunscreen. She'd laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of money. Still cautious, I'd insisted on at least paying for my flight. After some back and forth, they'd agreed to let me cover my airfare and chip in $500 for accommodations and activities, a figure that seemed reasonable for a week at a luxury resort. I'd sent the money to Brandon via Venmo weeks before the trip, with a clear memo. Hawaii vacation, airfare plus agreed $2,500 contribution. The tension started the moment we landed in Maui. Mr. Peterson, Robert, complained about our flight. Being late? It wasn't, causing them to wait at the airport. Diana made a comment about my casual travel outfit, clean jeans and a nice blouse, not being resort appropriate. Brandon's sister Megan, 24 and perpetually attached to her phone, barely acknowledged my existence except to ask if I'd brought anything decent to wear to dinner. The resort was stunning. Oceanfront views, multiple infinity pools, a private beach, and staff who seemed to materialize whenever you had the slightest need. Our room, which I later discovered was the least expensive in the Petersons' booking, was still more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever stayed. But I barely had time to appreciate it before the passive-aggressive comments began. Oh, you've never been to Hawaii before? How quaint. That Target sundress is actually quite cute, very budget-friendly. Brandon usually dates girls who are more adventurous. You're not going parasailing, but it's only $300 per person. Each day brought some new unplanned expense that was presented as non-optional. A sunset catamaran cruise, an exclusive luau. Shopping trips where Diana and Megan would pile clothes into my arms at high-end boutiques, then seem offended when I only purchased one modest item. Brandon kept telling me to just relax and enjoy, but I could feel my carefully planned vacation, budget hemorrhaging money with every passing hour. Still, I tried to make the best of it. This was Brandon's family, after all, and I loved him. I wanted them to like me. So I smiled through the barbed comments, participated in the activities I could afford, and kept meticulous records of exactly what I spent, a professional habit I couldn't break even on vacation. I also started noticing how often Brandon's credit card mysteriously wasn't working, resulting in charges going to mine with promises to pay me back later. By the 5th day, I was exhausted, Not from the tropical sun or activities, but from the constant social navigation and financial anxiety. I retreated to our room while the family went on a helicopter tour I'd politely declined. Sitting on the balcony, watching the waves crash against the shore, I started calculating exactly how much this mostly covered vacation was actually costing me. The total made my stomach lurch. Even without the helicopter tour and spa day they'd booked without me, I'd spent nearly twice my planned budget. It was then that Brandon called from the hotel lobby. "Mom wants to use your credit card for dinner tonight. The restaurant needs to pre-authorize for our party of 6, and she says her card is close to the limit from all the activities." Something in me finally snapped. "No," I said firmly. "I can't do that, Brandon. I'm already way over budget on this trip." There was a long silence. Then, in a tone I'd never heard him use before, "You know, you're being really ungrateful. My parents invited you on this amazing vacation and you're counting pennies? That's really disappointing." He hung up before I could respond. That night at dinner, which I insisted on paying only for myself, the temperature in the room was colder than the overpriced champagne they ordered without consulting anyone. Brandon barely spoke to me. Diana made several comments about financial compatibility being so important in relationships. Robert pontificated about generosity of spirit while ordering the most expensive steak on the menu. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach, knowing that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship. But even with that foreboding feeling, I never expected what came next. The $7,000 bill slid across the breakfast table on our final morning in paradise. The itemized list included my portion of the family's accommodation in a premium oceanfront suite, despite Brandon and I staying in a standard room, daily cabana rentals I never used, those spa treatments I wasn't invited to, the helicopter tour I'd declined, and even a $900 dinner that had occurred the night before we even arrived. In Hawaii, they'd apparently been tallying expenses and assigning me an equal share of everything the family did, whether I participated or not. When I pointed out that I'd already paid the agreed-upon worth $500 plus my own expenses, Diana's face hardened. "Well, that was just the deposit, dear. Surely you didn't think that would cover a luxury vacation." Brandon explained how these trips work. I looked at Brandon, who suddenly found the ceiling fan fascinating. "No," I said slowly. "He told me that you always cover the big expenses and that I just needed to pay the $1,500 we agreed on, which I did. Weeks ago." Robert cleared his throat. "Well, circumstances change. And as Diana said, real partners support each other financially. Brandon supports the family business. If you're serious about a future with him, you need to demonstrate your fiscal responsibility." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about money at all. This was a test. One designed for me to fail. Either I paid an outrageous sum I hadn't agreed to, proving I could be financially manipulated, or I refused and confirmed their suspicion that I wasn't good enough for their son. I reached for my phone, opened the Venmo app, and slid it across the table. "I already paid my agreed share. Here's the receipt, dated 6 weeks ago, with the memo line clearly stating what it was for. I also have records of every additional expense I've covered this week, including 3 dinners for the entire family. I'm happy to forward those receipts as well." Diana barely glanced at the screen. "Oh, sweetie, making a scene like this is so common. We're simply asking you to pay your fair share." "This isn't my fair share," I said, my voice now shaking with anger rather than shock. "This is financial manipulation, and I won't participate in it." I looked at Brandon one last time, giving him a final chance to step up. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I thought I saw a flash of something. Remorse? Embarrassment? But then he shook his head slightly. "Babe, just pay it. We can figure it out later." "No," I said, standing up. "We can't." I walked out, my legs somehow carrying me despite the weight of betrayal threatening to crush me. Back in our room, I started packing methodically, my mind racing through options. I couldn't afford a last-minute flight change, but the thought of spending another 6 hours trapped on a plane with these people made me physically ill. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, I noticed a notification on my phone. A pre-authorization hold from the airline for $4,850. A charge I definitely hadn't made. With shaking fingers, I called the airline, only to discover that someone had used my card, which had mysteriously disappeared from my wallet the night before and reappeared this morning, to book upgraded return flights for the entire Peterson family. A strange calm washed over me. They'd crossed a line. A legal one. Updated. Several people have asked if I could have just left them there. Legally, yes. The unauthorized use of my credit card made this identity theft, not just a family squabble. I actually spoke to hotel security and filed a police Report, which I'll get to in the next part. Would you have involved the authorities or just walked away? I take fraud very seriously. It's literally part of my job to identify it, report it, and prevent it. So when I discovered the Petersons had used my credit card without permission, my professional training kicked in along with my personal anger. First, I called the airline. Again, this time asking for their fraud department. I explained the situation in careful, factual language, emphasizing that I had not authorized the charges. I hadn't even been present when the booking was made. The representative was sympathetic and efficient. Within 20 minutes, the charges were frozen pending investigation, effectively canceling the Petersons' return flights. Next, I called hotel security. Many people don't realize that luxury resorts have robust security protocols for exactly this type of situation. The head of security, a former police officer named Kai, listened carefully to my explanation. He asked if I wanted to file a police report. I did. While waiting for the police to arrive, I used my phone to take photos of everything. The itemized $7,000 bill, my original Venmo payment, text messages from before the trip confirming the $1,500 agreement, and the fraudulent airline charge. I then emailed everything to myself with a time-stamped summary of events. Old habits from audit trails die hard. I was sitting calmly in the hotel's security office when Brandon found me. His face was flushed with anger or embarrassment, possibly both. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. "My parents just got notification that their flights were canceled. They're freaking out." I looked at him steadily. "Someone used my credit card without authorization to book flights. That's fraud. I reported it. It was an honest mistake. Dad thought he was using his card. You know they were planning to pay you back? Were they? That's not what they said at breakfast when they handed me a $7,000 bill I never agreed to." Brandon ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Just reverse the fraud claim, and we'll sort this out back home." "There's nothing to sort out," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "Your family tried to scam me. When that didn't work, they committed credit card fraud. These aren't matters of opinion, Brandon. They're facts." His expression changed then, from frustration to a kind of sneering disbelief. "So that's it? You're choosing money over me? Over my family?" "No," I replied. "I'm choosing self-respect and legal boundaries. There's a difference." The local police officer arrived shortly after. He was professional and took my report efficiently, though I could tell this wasn't the first tourist dispute he'd handled. When he asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated briefly, looking at Brandon's increasingly pale face. "I want it. On record," I finally said. "But I'm willing to drop charges if they repay me for all unauthorized charges and additional expenses their actions caused me." It was a concession I made not for Brandon or his family, but for myself. I wanted this over with as cleanly as possible. The officer nodded and went to speak with the Petersons. I turned to Brandon. "I'm changing my flight. I'm leaving today. You should call your parents and tell them to do the same." "They can't just get new flights," he protested. "It's high season. Do you know how expensive last-minute bookings are? Right now?" The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. "Yes, Brandon, I do know. That's why using someone else's credit card to upgrade your flights without their permission is not just unethical, but illegal." Brandon's face hardened. "You know what? My parents were right about you. You've always been uptight about money, always tracking everything, always hesitating to join us for expensive dinners, always choosing the cheap wine. It's exhausting." His words should have hurt. Instead, they clarified everything. Being responsible with money isn't a character flaw, Brandon, and tracking expenses isn't the same as being cheap. I've paid for countless dinners, trips, and gifts throughout our relationship. The difference is that I spend within my means and don't trick others into covering my expenses. "Whatever," he scoffed. "Have fun flying home alone. In case it isn't obvious, we're done." "That might be the first honest thing you've said this entire trip," I replied. As he walked away, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and relief. 2 years of my life gone, but also a future of financial manipulation avoided. The resort staff, to their credit, were incredibly supportive once they understood the situation. They helped me book a new flight for that evening and arranged for a private shuttle to the airport. The manager even quietly informed me that they had removed the incidental charges hold on my credit card immediately, so I wouldn't have any surprise charges from the hotel. By the time I boarded my flight that evening, the situation had largely resolved itself. The Petersons had been forced to book new economy flights for the following day, apparently at nearly triple the original cost due to the last-minute nature and high season. They had grudgingly reimbursed me for the fraudulent charge attempt to avoid formal charges. Brandon had texted once not to apologize but to inform me that my ridiculous overreaction had shown everyone your true colors. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The 6-hour flight home gave me plenty of time to process what had happened. I scrolled through photos from happier times with Brandon, trying to identify the red flags I'd missed. There were plenty: his casual forgetting of his wallet, his parents' probing questions about my income and savings, how he discouraged me from bringing my financial expertise into family discussions. Small things that, when pieced together, formed a clear pattern of financial manipulation. By the time the plane landed, I'd deleted Brandon's contact information and blocked his family on all social media. I'd also written the first draft of a blog post titled "Financial Red Flags in Relationships, My $7,000 Lesson in Paradise." I never heard directly from the Petersons again, though mutual friends reported that they'd spread a story about me abandoning Brandon on a family vacation after being asked to contribute fairly. Brandon apparently moved back home shortly after, something about his apartment lease being under his parents' names and them deciding not to renew it. As for me, that blog post went viral in personal finance circles. It led to a weekly column, speaking engagements, and eventually a side business teaching financial literacy to young women. I became known as someone who took a stand against financial manipulation and helped others identify the warning signs before they ended up with their own $7,000 bill in paradise. The irony? That disastrous vacation ended up being the best investment I ever made, just not in the way anyone expected. Updated. Thanks for all the supportive comments, everyone. It's been 2 years since this happened, and I'm in a much better place now, personally and financially. My financial literacy blog now has over 200K subscribers, and I'm dating someone who respects my boundaries. The question I get most often is this: would you have done anything differently if you could go back? Would you?